New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring. And hello again, dear ones. Reverend Robert with you here on a Saturday morning, 9 o'clock on the Mountain Time Zone. And that means it is time for our Science of Mind and Spirit Conversation series. Happens every Saturday morning. And so grateful that you're with us today. I have the great pleasure. I get to speak about chapter number 16, Principles of Successful Living. It's a juicy topic. I love it. I have all kinds of, my textbook has got all kinds of annotations and underlines and markings and highlighting and all kinds of stuff. So I can promise you we're going to have a really, really good time today. I do want to say thank you to everybody that put together the May series on physical perfection. We took chapters 14 and 15 and stretched them out across the entire month. Reverend Mark Gilbert, Dr. Tracy Brown, religious science practitioner, Reverend Muwada Razuli, myself, we all put together that series, and I think it, with no prep, we didn't talk to each other. We just each took our turn, and I think it turned out great. So if you missed any of those, please catch them in the archives on YouTube, or catch the whole series. It's binge-worthy, I believe. Cool. All right, this week, we're talking about the principles of successful living. Now, do please feel free to chime along, chat along, comment in the comment box. I might pull them up on the screen, talk about them. I might not. I'm not sure yet, but we've got 12 pages to get through here today, and there's so much here. I want to dive right in, if you would. So again, we're in the Science of Mind and Spirit by Ernest Holmes. I'm on page 266. The Principles of Successful Living. Now, Holmes breaks this chapter up into 5 pieces. Not something for nothing. That's where we're going to launch off from. The law is infinite, demonstrating the law, spirit and mental law, success and happiness. And that's all going to happen over the next 12 pages. So again, feel free to add notes to your book. Or if you're or highlighting or any kind of annotations you like to help you remember and understand what sparks you here today as we go along, and chat in the chat box any questions or comments you might have. Okay, right off the top, lessons on prosperity, and he highlights prosperity. Lessons on prosperity and mental control of conditions are sometimes dangerous because of the misunderstanding of this subject. Okay, Science of Mind is not a get-rich-quick scheme. Neither does it promise something for nothing. It does, however, and here we get to the good part, it does, however, promise the one who will comply with its teachings that they shall be able to bring greater possibilities and happiness into their experience. I believe this is actually one of the largest criticisms of Science of Mind and New Thought in general that I see in the world and on the internet, is a wanting to tear down this philosophy because it has been used in ways by some who misused these principles in an attempt to sell a get-rich-quick scheme. However, the philosophy itself is solid in that it is not that. So what Holmes is telling us really is the first principle of successful living is recognizing that nobody's going to do it for you. God's not going to drop a gold brick in your hand. You're not going to be able to sit around and pray your way to success all day long. Now, we do use prayer, but we have to be able to take the inspired action that goes along with that prayer and with our spiritual practices. Our acceptance must become a subjective embodiment of this principle. That's from the top of page 267. And he continues, no one can demonstrate peace and cling to unhappiness. So this is that place that we see right now in our lives, in most social media feeds, are people that want to cling to the unhappiness. They want to cling to a belief that something's wrong in the world. They want to believe, they do believe, and they want to cling to the belief that their way is misunderstood and misinterpreted. But what I see is, and what Holmes is going to point us to, is that we have to look at, does this, what I'm clinging to, bring more life or not? Is what I'm pushing, what I'm peddling, what I'm selling, bringing more life to the world, or is it tearing down what's already existed? No person whose entire time is spent in the contemplation of limitation can demonstrate freedom from such limitation. That's in the second paragraph of page 267. And Holmes writes that in all caps. Now, what we do remember and know about Holmes is when he gets writing in all caps, he really means it. It's something important to pay attention to. This just, when we look at this chapter, this is the place to remember to start. No person whose entire time is spent in the contemplation of limitation can demonstrate freedom from such demonstration. It takes time. And it takes time to change our belief system, to change our daily spiritual practices, to change our habits, to change what we mentally put into our minds, so that we come to a place where there is no limitation, where limitation is not even a contemplation, where we say, I'd like to do this, and we recognize the resources are there, rather than falling into an old habit like, oh, but where's the money going to come from? Or, oh, but why we don't have enough people to do that? Or, oh, we don't have enough resources to do that. We have to train. We have to train ourselves to accept the truth, and what we desire must be a subjective embodiment of the truth we desire. We must embody prosperity if we wish to experience prosperity. We must embody peace if we wish to experience peace. And we cannot demonstrate peace if our mind is focused on all the places where there isn't peace in the world right now. Now, this is not to say we stick our head in the sand and ignore the real life conditions that people are experiencing, but it doesn't mean that I have to give it more power. It doesn't mean I have to spend my entire waking day contemplating where war is going to break out next, or where this isn't working, or where that isn't working. That is war within myself. So when we realize that we're not going to get anything for nothing here, we're going to have to do the work. And we're going to have to do the work first in the mental realm, first in our mental mind, and then we're going to have to do the work in the physical realm. We're going to have to use our hands and our voice and our influence and our platforms and our connections and the work that we do. We're going to have to use all of that in service to a spiritual ideal. Because as Holmes continues on that page 267, the law is infinite. The science of mind is based entirely upon the supposition that we are surrounded by a universal mind into which we think. This mind, in its original state, fills all space. It fills the space that we use in the universe. It is in the individual as well as outside of the individual. As one thinks into this universal mind, that we set a law in motion, which is creative and which contains within itself a limitless possibility. I love that we are surrounded by a universal mind into which we think. And our thoughts impress upon that universal mind. It can't do it. It can't operate any other way. So our thoughts impress upon the universal mind. At the bottom of that page, Holmes writes, "It is a great mistake to say, take what you wish, for you can have anything you like." We do not take what we wish, but we do attract to ourselves that which is like our thought. Like our thought. It doesn't mean that everything that happens in our lives is because of our thought. Our thoughts play a part of it. Our thoughts play a part of how we respond to it. There are random acts that we don't attract into our lives. We must become more if we wish to draw a greater good into our lives. Now, folks, I do like to pause and remember that I am in a personal journey of translating the pronouns in this book, and often doing it as we go into more inclusive programs. So where you see Holmes speaking to man or he, I'm working to change those and be more inclusive on those. But we must become more of what we wish to draw a greater good into our lives. We must, in the mental realm first, become more of what we want to see. I have a great practice. There's a lot of practices for this, a lot of ways to practice this. One of my favorites is Jan Randolph Price's prosperity book. And I have a copy of it back there on my shelf because I use it every day. And in that book, he's got a great little 40-day practice of affirmations. And really, it's 10 affirmations, and they're all based around prosperity. And if you read them in order, it's the principles of creating more and demonstrating more prosperity in your life. And the idea is that you do each one in turn for 10 days, and then you start again, and you do that for 40 days, and you change your consciousness. Why 40 days? I don't know. That's the number he picked. Myself, I'm closing in on 700 days. 700 days of daily practice. Remember, it takes time. This is not a get-rich-quick scheme. It takes time. But as I consistently focus my awareness, my thoughts on a grander truth. Now, prosperity doesn't mean that I suddenly have the money of a Bill Gates or a Jeff Bezos or an Elon Musk or any of that. Prosperity is something that we're going to define each individually. And this is not a lesson on prosperity today, but I think it's one of the greatest examples we can use of where dedicated thought can produce physical results and tangible results, results we can measure and measure easily. Do I have more in the bank account at the end of the month this month than last month? Does it feel a little easier for me to make a purchase or to do something spontaneously? On page 268, Holmes continues. And remember, we're talking about the law itself here today, that universal law. The law is a law of liberty, but not a law of license. It is exact and exacting, and unless we are willing to comply with its nature and work with it, the law, along the lines of its inherent being, we shall receive no great benefit. Everyone must pay the price for that which we receive, and the price is paid in mental and spiritual coin. I cannot demonstrate peace if I'm thinking and I'm spending my mental and spiritual energy in war. whether that's with myself, with a close friend, a relative, my church, an organization, the world at large, the government, the people that don't believe like I do about politics. If I am at war in any of these areas, I cannot possibly demonstrate peace. But what I'm doing is I'm spending my mental and emotional energy to create a prevailing thought that peace is not the norm, that war is prevalent. There it is again, and there it is again. And oh, look, over there it is, and over here it is. You ever buy a new car? And then you start seeing that color car, that exact car, and that color everywhere you go? We must. I don't think there's a greater call in the world than to pay attention to where our thoughts are headed, where our general thoughts continually push us, and where we are propagating those thoughts. And if there's a limitation in those thoughts, if the thoughts are limiting, I can't, there's not enough, you shouldn't, I shouldn't, it's danger. If the thoughts are limiting, we really want to make sure that we look at what that prevailing, consistent, repetitive thought is bringing into my life. Because I may not like the results. And the results are often not exactly what I say I want. We'll get to that in a little bit. As nature, this is the third paragraph here now on page 268. As nature conspires to produce and manifest the freedom of the individual, that it may unloose its own energy, we may be sure God is for us, whatever our conception of God may be, whatever your image of God is. The Christ consciousness, Buddha consciousness, Muhammad, Allah, Vishnu, Kuan Yin, Source Energy, Divine One, Mother Earth, quantum field, whatever the universal law, whatever your perception of the divine may be, we have to be sure, we have to be in the place of believing that this is for us, not against us, and definitely not about us. Whatever's happening in my life, there is an opportunity. Now, there are those on the internet that will jump on right now and want to argue vehemently that what we're teaching is spiritual bypass. That how could we say to someone that experiences a horrific event, abuse, physical, mental, in any way, that will say what we're promoting is abusive, to invite a quote victim of an event to find the good or find the lesson or find what is beneficial for them in that moment. And I say, you're right. We shouldn't do that in the moment. When something happens to me in life, horrific, the first thing we got to do is heal. Not try to peel apart what I did or what I didn't do or what I was thinking. Because again, there are random acts that happen. There are things that they just out of nowhere happen. They didn't happen to us. It looks that way. They didn't happen because of us. We didn't create that. It can look that way. But once the healing is complete, we have an opportunity to look more deeply and recognize that there was something in there somewhere. My life moved in a new way. My life, and we have countless stories. Just jump on the internet. Countless stories of people that what appears to be a horrific, life-changing event does change their lives, but it changes it towards a beneficial expression, towards more good, to doing the work they're really here to do. This thing must act in accordance with definite law in the universe. And this law says that wherever, whenever, and wherever there is an adequate subjective image which does not contradict the nature of the universe, That image will not only tend to take form, but will take form and will manifest. An adequate subjective image. That's why a random thought like, oh, I wish you would just roll over and die, doesn't happen. That's why we can't just cast a curse on somebody and boom, they drop dead. It doesn't work that way. There has to be an adequate subjective image, which does not contradict the nature, the nature of the universe. Again, what's the nature? To live life, to bring more good, to expand, not to contract or tear down. There is more than it is actually the very nature of the universe to allow for the destruction and the dissolving, if you will, of limiting beliefs and limiting ideas and limiting structures as they become, as they leave their necessity, as they're no longer necessary in our lives. The stuff that doesn't serve will drift away. Yeah, we can go after it and crumble it and actively deconstruct those beliefs, but eventually, whether we do or we don't, eventually we're going to replace those with a better belief because we're going to learn. The image will not tend to take form, but will take form and will manifest if it is in alignment with the universal nature. If it isn't, it doesn't. And this is why, from my perspective, for as many times as humanity has attempted genocide on this planet, I don't believe we've ever actually completed it. We've never actually successfully gotten to the point of absolute genocide. Because it's not the universal nature. If it were, it would have worked. But it isn't. So it doesn't work. And some event comes along and interrupts the misuse of these principles, the misuse of these laws, of these universal laws. The last paragraph, bottom of the page on 268. This teaching should not be confused with the idea that we can show people how to get what they want. True prayer, and remember, everything we do is based on the concept of prayer. True prayer must be, thy will be done. Thy will be done. But the implication relative to the will of God is that prayer is not a submission to the inevitability of evil or limitation. It is a knowledge that the will of God is always good, right? We don't say that there's no evil in this world. There is. I see it. I see it in the gun shootings that happen in America every other hour anymore. I see it in the famine that is still across this planet in different pockets. I see it in the aggressive, violent behavior of countries towards others. I see evil all over the place. But I'm not willing to believe that that is the will of God, that that is the nature of the divine, that that is the universal impulse. The universal impulse is to live and bring more life and live that life happily. So if we assume God, however we define it, however we perceive it, whatever our relationship is with the divine, if we see that as the principle of life, the principle of life cannot produce death without destroying itself. The will of life can only be to be life. This is the top of page 269. Everything then should tend to expansion and multiplication and multiplication in the divine plan. That is the will of God. There's a line not in this book that Holmes used to describe the divine as that one self-existent cause that is forever taking on form and abandoning that form in order to take on new form. So I invite you to take a look at your life for a moment. Identify where your life, where you have adopted a form of some sort. Maybe it was a house you owned. And eventually, the form, the experience of your life outgrew that house, that demonstration, that boyfriend, that girlfriend. and you became more. This is the process. This is what's happening. And this is what's happening in the world right now. Old belief patterns are dying. Old belief systems are melting back into the nothingness from whence they came, so that there is room, so there is an impulse, so there is a rising tide of new belief, a belief in equity, a belief in social justice, a belief in oneness. This is happening in our churches. This is happening in our organizations. This is happening in our media. And yes, it may not always appear this way, but it's happening in our politics as well, no matter where we live on the planet. This isn't just an American experience. Remember, in the Science of Mind, we talk about envisioning a world where borders are irrelevant, where everyone is awakened to their human magnificence in such a way that we are a living embodiment of oneness. So borders would absolutely be irrelevant, where there's no question about who can migrate where and where is safe for who. It's a big vision. It's not here today. This does not get peace quick scheme. This takes time. And it takes all of us. All of us. Anyone that can hear this message, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, anyone that's capable of hearing this message is being called to be part of this change. We should interpret the will of God to be everything that expresses life without hurt. Anything that will enable us to express greater life, greater happiness, greater power, so long as it does not harm anyone, must be the will of God for us. As much life as one can conceive will become a part of their existence, as long as it does not harm anyone. We have to perceive the world. We have to look at the world from global perspective, with a global eye, recognizing that the systems and the activities and the actions in one area ripple and affect the whole of the planet. Many have heard the story of the butterflies, and if enough butterflies flap their wings in one place, it starts a tsunami in another. Yes, it's all connected, folks. Everything, the whole planet. So, we have to, I'm going to jump over to page 270 here in a second. We have to recognize that to have the life we truly desire, we have to be willing to let go of the old stuff and move towards a new vision. And every activity we do, every belief we hold has to be one that does no harm. First, do no harm. That's not us. That's not, that's medicine. That's doctors. The Hippocratic Oath. First, do no harm. Is it harmful to believe in the limitation of others? Yes. Is it harmful to believe that others aren't good enough? Yes. That they don't believe properly? Yes. That they're not worthy of being on the planet? Yes. Doesn't matter what culture we come from. Doesn't matter what color our skin may be. To act against the universal principle of do no harm, to act in a way that that misuses these laws to take life rather than create life, that's malpractice. And we don't stand for that. And we don't promote that. Promote living. The criteria, this is the second paragraph on page 270. The criterion for anyone as to what is right or wrong for them is not to be found in some other's judgment. Let's read that one again. The criterion for anyone as to what is right or wrong is not found in another's judgment. The criterion is, does the thing I wish to do express more life, more happiness, more peace to myself, and at the same time do no harm? If it does, it is right. It is not selfish. But if it is done at the expense of anyone, then in such degree we are making a wrong use of the law. Well, I want to go to the ball game on Saturday. Yep. And my wife is going to be left at home with the kids and an overabundance of work and too much to do. And I promise this, but I want to do. Then it's wrong if it harms another. Well, it's my free will to own a gun and shoot it in my backyard at night. Yes, unless it does harm to another. And then that's not in the right. That's not moving us towards more success, more living. We're going to continue on page 270 in the fourth paragraph. Man or woman does not exist for the purpose of making an impression upon our environment. We do exist to express ourselves in and through our environment. It is not necessary that we leave an impression. It is not necessary if we should pass on this day that anyone should remember that we have ever lived. All that means anything is that while we live, and wherever we go from here, we shall keep on living. Now remember, the activities of greed and selfishness and doing what we want at the expense of others, financially, emotionally, mentally, physically, doing anything that may hurt or harm another, physically, mentally, emotionally, or spiritually. What's in your consciousness is a spiritual malpractice because it harms someone. It is quite a burden lifted when we realize that we do not have to move the world. It is going to move anyway. This is the second to last paragraph on page 270. It is quite a burden lifted when we realize that we do not have to move the world. It is going to move anyway. This realization does not lessen our duty or our social obligation. It clarifies it, enables us to do joyously and free from morbidity that which we should do in the social state. Here it is. Treat and move your feet. Pray and take action. Do the practice, but get out there. This realization does not lessen our duty or our social obligation. You know, one of the contributors here on our program, Dr. Tracy Brown, has a Facebook group. If you're not a part of it, I'm going to encourage you to go check it out, called What Is Mine to Do? What is mine to do? And I have always seen that group as a demonstration of this piece. Yes, we don't have to, we know that individually we're not going to change the world, but we also know that collectively we can change human consciousness, and that changes the world. But knowing is not enough. Playing the mental game is not enough. We have to take action. It is our duty and social obligation. But we got to be able to do it with joy. We got to be able to do it in a way that we realize that our unique and perhaps limited contribution, it does and will make a difference. In that group, what is mine to do? The intention is to eradicate, eliminate, heal, and clean up race-based hatred and violence on the planet. And it asks us consistently, what is mine to do to be a part of that mission, that vision? It's a great group. I encourage you to check it out. It is quite a burden lifted when we realize we do not have to move the world. It's going to move anyway. And if I'm trying to hold things back, if I'm trying to hold tight to what used to be, well, that's not how it was when I was a kid. Well, the kids these days, when I'm trying to hold that back, that's not the nature of life, folks. That's not the way. That's when I get myself in trouble. When I try to hold on to what used to be rather than going with what is wanting to be. With this in mind, and believing that there is an infinite law of the spirit, or law of life, which tends to multiply our gifts, because in doing so it multiplies its own experience, its own pleasure, its own fruition, we may assume that the spiritual human is already success, is already supplied with everything we need. The potential of all things exists in the universal wholeness. So we must demonstrate this truth. Page 271, fourth paragraph. The way to work is to begin right where we are, and through constantly applying ourselves to the truth, we gradually increase in wisdom and in understanding, for in this way alone will good results be obtained. If day by day we have a greater understanding and a clearer concept, if daily we are realizing more of truth and applying it in our actions, then we are on the right path and eventually shall be made free. It's not a get-rich-quick scheme. It takes time, it takes practice. It is a wonderful experiment and a great adventure to make conscious use of the law, to feel that we can plant an idea in mind and see it gradually take form. The student, practitioner, one that practices, should take time every day to see their life as they wish it to be, to make a mental picture of the ideal, to pass this picture over to the law and go about their business with a calm assurance that on the inner side of life, something is taking place. There should not be any sense of hurry or worry about this, just a calm, peaceful sense of reality. Let the law work through and express itself in the experience. There should be no idea of compulsion. We do not have to make the law work. It is its nature to work. In gladness, then, we should make known our desires, and in confidence we should wait upon the perfect law to manifest through us. It's all on us, folks. If we don't like what's going on, we have the power and the prescription, how to do, and the practices on how to change the conditions of our lives, how to do away with the old limited thinking and that which no longer serves, to abandon the forms that we've created in our lives so that new forms may take their place, so that we may bring new form, a new experience of our lives onto the planet. Later on that page, he writes, there is no medium between us and the universal mind except our own thought. In such degree as we place a medium, we have to absorb that medium before we can make a direct approach. The Bible even says there is no mediator between God and man except Christ. Christ meaning the truth of ourselves. There's no medium. This is why the work of a practitioner is so very important in our lives. Because if I set my practitioner up as the voice of God, if I set anything up as the voice of God, then I have to live according to that belief pattern. So if I put any one person as the medium between me and the divine, then I have to live according to their beliefs, which may be very limited. I don't know. This is personally why I don't visit psychics. This is personally why I don't play with cards and tarot and all the different mediumships. Because we have a direct pipeline. I don't need to stop and try to interpret someone else's interpretation. I can go directly to the source, and so can you. That's what our practice is about. When intelligence makes a demand upon itself, when intelligence, you, makes a demand upon that inner wisdom, that inner source, it answers its own demand out of its own nature and cannot help doing so. In philosophy, this idea is called emergent evolution. We're on page 273, by the way, paragraph 2. In philosophy, this idea is called emergent evolution. Wherever the universe makes a demand upon itself, out of that very demand is created its fulfillment. But that demand can only be when the demand is in the nature of the universe. So I cannot pray that another be hurt or harmed. You could try, but it ain't gonna work. We must make our demand within the nature of the universe, aligned with these principles of livingness. On page 274, treatment is not for the purpose of making things happen. It is to provide within ourselves an avenue through which they may happen. We're just opening ourselves through our spiritual practices to a greater realization of a truth that is already there, and we're just awakening to it. And sometimes we got to let go of the old stuff to allow for new stuff to come in. Also on 274, paragraph 3, treatment is not something one does to another, not something one does to an environment, nor to a situation. It is always the thing one does to themselves. Whatever method enables you to do this is a good method, a good way. Science of mind, religious science, Centers for Spirituality, when we get a little boiled into it's got to be exactly this way, we can have that conversation another day. And if you're hitting the main points and the main principles, I got a lot of personally, I have a lot of leeway if it's working for you. Whatever method enables one to do this is a good method, a good way. Treatment is an action in thought alone. It opens up the avenues of thought, expands the consciousness, and lets reality through. It clarifies the mentality, removes the obstructions of thought, and lets in the light. We already live in a perfect universe, but it needs to be mentally seen and spiritually experienced before it can become a part of our everyday life. This is the work we do as personal practitioners for ourselves. And when I'm having a hard time, I go to a professional practitioner like Dr. Tracy or any of the people on this team and invite them to help me receive this universal truth, to realign me with the nature of the divine, with this nature of living. In such degree as the answer and the result is contingent upon any external circumstances, any existing known fact, the treatment is not in the absolute. So if my prayer, my treatment requires something that is not an existent circumstance, that is not aligned with the truth, it is not an absolute treatment and it's not going to work. It is in the relative and necessarily conditioned by the contingent, which it is. I'm sorry, never mind that part. So much to do, and we're running out of time. But that's okay. We're getting towards the end of this chapter. Remember, folks, you can chime along, ask questions, make comments as we go. So over on 276, in the middle of the first paragraph, Holmes writes this: we must differentiate between the divine presence as a universal spirit and the universal law. Now, the spirit he describes as a thing to be communed with. So differentiate the difference between the divine presence as the spirit, which we commune with, and the law, which is just a blind force, which just does what it is here to do. We cannot divert the law. The law is a blind force. Unless we misuse it, we should be very careful to follow a constructive course. The law is absolute. We should trust its impersonal action implicitly. It can do anything for us that we can conceive of it doing. It is the law of freedom to all who believe and obey it. Of a law of freedom. We can do anything we can conceive of through this law, through these universal principles. But it's not a get-rich-quick scheme. It takes time. And it can often take more time than we humanly would prefer. Let's be straight up about it. To continue, we must realize that the universal spirit is the supreme knower in the universe. The law can only operate on that which is known. And a little bit farther down, we should daily train our thoughts to recognize the spirit in everything we do, say, or think. This is to pray unceasingly. To pray unceasingly, to consistently throughout our day train ourselves to recognize the spirit rather than the evil, to recognize the impulse for life and for good rather than the belief that it's all wrong and it's all bad and we got to take it all down and we got to tear it all apart. Remember, that which no longer serves will naturally crumble under the weight of truth. I get it. There are still places in our country where it would appear that is not true, but I have to have the faith and belief and continue along that we are doing the work. In consciousness, we are adding more weight. We are adding more people to this philosophy every day. There are more people that don't even believe this philosophy, but that recognize race-based hatred has got to end, that gun violence has got to end, that sexual abuse, that child trafficking has to end. That these things have to end. And as we get more people believing that truth, then that consciousness, the weight of truth will crumble and dissolve these social ills. It's just not happening fast enough for most of us. I get it. We should daily train our thoughts to recognize the spirit in everything we do, say, or think. So it is happening on divine time. Render therefore unto Caesar the things which are Caesar's, and unto God the things that are God. A constant realization of the presence of spirit will provide a sense of divine companionship that no other attitude could produce. We are one with each other. Deeply, we are one. We are in companionship with each other. And that leads us to his final section here, success and happiness. Success and happiness are ours when we deal with absoluteness. This is the attitude we should have. What we need to know is the truth. This does not mean that we need not be active. Of course, we shall be active, but we need not compel things to happen. Only remember, we are surrounded by a universal subjectivity, a subjective creative consciousness, which is receptive, neutral, impersonal, always receiving the impress of our thoughts, and which has no alternative than to operate it directly upon it, thus creating the things we think. When I pray, this is the essence of the release statement, of the final statement in spiritual mind treatment. To let go of any idea that I am compelling this to happen. To let go of any idea that it is my limited thinking that is actually coming into form. And to be in a place of recognizing that the law, the universal law, is taking my prayer, is taking my belief, is taking my words and the overall belief system within my words, and taking that and creating from that. And it's not always exactly what I imagine. I have to be trusting that it has to act. It cannot return my prayer void or unfulfilled. It must take all of that and bring that into some form, some experience. And then I get to live with it. Then I get to make it use that information to create the next experience, and use that information to create the next experience. The last paragraph in this chapter. A good demonstration is made when truth, gathering its own power, lifts one out of their environment. And until that time comes, we should stay where we are in order that we may know what we have made, in order that we may know we have made a demonstration. A good demonstration is when the divine truth, the law, the nature of our lives, the nature of life, under its own power, lifts us out of our environment, changes the conditions around us. That is how we have known we have made a demonstration. Not when I go out and push buttons or try to make or force it or try to create the conditions, but when the prayer lifts me out of that. Principle is absolute insofar as any individual can actually induce within consciousness upon principle a definite concrete acceptance of their desire, it will manifest even though every thought on earth had to change to compel it. If it were a bit of information that was needed for the demonstration that only one person on earth knew, and that person was in the center of Africa, the information would be produced. See, what I love is the reminder that success and happiness comes not from doing, but from being. And that in this wonderful, wild world, all the answers to all the questions you might have exist within you because they exist within the one. And you are an expression of that oneness, and you have that opportunity, that ability to bring that oneness forward. That's how it works. That's why we pray. So if you're in a space of prayer, I'm going to invite you to join me this morning. We don't always pray on this program, but today we do. I bring myself into a state of consciousness, remembering there is only one. And in that oneness, there is the truth. There is that source of truth. There is that everything that is expressing itself as my life, your life perfectly. It is in that one life that we bring forward all that we are to experience all that wants to be known, all that wants to be experienced and expressed through our individual lives. And that is good. So I invite each one here to let go of the old limiting beliefs, to cast aside anything that is unlike this flow of life, this sense of givingness, this sense of love and compassion and passion for the human condition. To let go of all the limiting beliefs, all the beliefs of lack and limitation and war and evil, to let go of all that stuff so that we may no longer influence the future with those old limiting beliefs, but influence our future with the belief in abundance and prosperity of love and light and beauty and truth. And rest in faith and knowingness that is already happening in the mind of the divine, that the law, the universal law, is already taking these thoughts, already taking the belief system, the prevalent belief system of my life, to manifest and bring forward into my life experiences and opportunities and demonstrations and forms and relationships and all that it is to move me along my pattern, along my journey of enlightenment. If that's happening as my life, it's happening as all life, so it must be happening as your life right now. Everything in your life necessary to propel you into the next great dimension of living, the next great experience of living on this planet. And it is all good. So I am grateful for this reminder, for this truth, for this opportunity to be present. Most especially grateful to know God's got this and I can let it be. So I get out of the way and let God do what God does. And so it is. And so it is. Thank you for being with us today, dear ones. My name is Reverend Robert. I'm going to get out of here. Let you get into your Saturday morning. Now, we do have a couple of things. Just one thing I want to talk to you about. We've got a new thing happening on Saturday mornings. It's going to start happening today. Where did it go? Oh, somebody moved it. I had an overlay to share with you, but there it is. Aha. This is called our first Saturday prayer jamboree. It's going to happen in about 5 minutes on that Zoom link. If you need that, I'll drop that in the chat box as well for you. But it's a private Zoom room, and we're going to jump together and do the first Saturday jamboree. It's a fun time. Let me put this in the links for you. I forgot to do this earlier. My apologies. But The idea is you can come receive a prayer, be a prayer, or bring a prayer. Share a prayer, bring a prayer, or be a prayer. Our new program here on the New Thought Media Network. I'm going to get out of here for now. Let you, if you'd like to join us, join us. Otherwise, please join us again next week. Join us tomorrow. Tell your friends. Let everybody know what we're doing here on the New Thought Media Network. We'd really like to expand and get this in the eyes and the ears and the hearts and the minds of more and more people. I'm Rev Robert. I'm going to get out of here for now. Thank you for being with us. We look forward to seeing you again soon. Until then, peace and blessings.